Hi, I'm Plushy Matt, and this is totally not the 20th time I've tried to do this intro. This is Plushy Matt Studies Marc Brunet's Art School for Digital Artists, or whatever title I decide to give this thing. So, welcome to Term 2. This is the first week, and this is kind of less of a review and more like following my journey along with Term 2. You can just kind of watch my progress and my thoughts on what I am learning. So this week, the first assignment is to watch Visual Communication number 2. Quick apology for the title card. I kind of ran out of time trying to get this video ready, so sorry about that. So first up, I had to watch Visual Communication 2, and I kind of learned about dots, points, lines, shapes, volume, structures, patterns, textures, size, sans, scale, and space. And here are some examples where I try and get a better understanding of it for myself. So first up, we've got this one from Antoine. We're talking about dots and points in this one here. Kind of like the dot is a focus point of attention. Differences in the distance of dots can kind of affect each other and what it kind of means. And I thought this was a really good example. We show like a really strong focal point at this kind of like, I don't know, ball of energy. And you can almost feel the gravity, the way like everything is deliberately put to kind of draw your eyes into that dot. And I thought that was a really cool example for this. I'd also say to a lesser degree, the kind of spaceship on the left here is also a focal point, a dot. And as a result of that, I think it kind of makes a really nice, I really feel like this is just going straight towards that focus point of the kind of energy ball. Brilliant example in my opinion. Next up is lines, kind of real or implied. Lines separate objects, imply movement, and thick and thin lines can imply weight or light. So this example is from Will Gist. Apologise for terrible pronunciations on these, but yeah, this I felt this showed really clear lines that separate the kind of overgrowth on the left of the canvas, as well as like this kind of open free area on the right hand side. And I think like another implied line shows the character kind of breaking out, the way that it's like is the word perpendicular line. It's like at a right angle to the overgrowth. So it's just kind of really standing out there. It really shows kind of like breaking through from one to the other. And that kind of also implies that his movements, the kind of like thickness of the lines to the left show a lot of weight, which is again contrasting to the right hand side where everything's quite free and open. And I think what's important about this, not just the lines, is the contrast between them, which really kind of helps tell that story. And I also felt that kind of like the character to me feels kind of curved. That's not like a perfectly straight line. The characters kind of got this curve to them, which kind of suggests a very natural and relaxed way of them moving. So next up is shapes and volumes. And so with shape and volumes, you kind of have to think of like form or space. So form is the positive, negative is space. And forms are anything that you place in the negative space of your canvas. So and 3D volumes will obviously carry more weight than a 2D volume. And this example from Woman, I think, is a really, really nice example and really easy to read, kind of like the differences between kind of like the positive and the negative. So we've got a really, really clear shape and form of the character Aquarius. They're quite striking out into that negative space and the rest of the canvas. And I think it makes for a really interesting silhouette. The difference of levels in this is like the depth of the character. It's very 3D. Whereas you go to the background and it's a lot more 2D depth. And I think sometimes there's also some breaking of the rules in this. So the kind of back of the hair, it's kind of going to 2D. As you kind of follow up the base of the hair and follow up towards her head, you can kind of see it becomes from 2D to a lot more 3D and a lot more volume to it. And I think that makes for a really exciting piece with this one. So next up is structures, patterns, and textures. Kind of grouping patterns and textures together. These are kind of adding interest and depth and realism to work. Patterns are mostly inorganic. Things like on the right hand side, you've got these kind of grates, and textures are more organic, like the stuff you've got kind of the wood rot above this kind of storefront, whatever this is. So this example is from Anthony Brault. There's a lot of texture on this piece. This is kind of like screaming out with loads of texture, and I think that makes it so much more realistic. The patterns that we find in the window are sort of like a and the grate, sorry, it's kind of, and the bricks show that there's lots of patterns, but the patterns kind of show the inorganic kind of man-made side of this, whereas like the textures kind of show the kind of natural side to it. Kind of gives it that life. I think if it was all just patterns, it would be very kind of dull, and then this makes it feel like a really alive, lived-in. You can almost squint and believe that this is a photograph. I think this is fantastic. Yeah, and just it makes it just so interesting. So next is size and scale. This again is talking about relationships between objects on the canvas, and I think a lot of these have been talking about the relationship of different things, kind of understanding something through something else. Scale can show the contrast and similarities between two elements on the canvas, but size is absolute. But the scale shows us sizes in relation to other elements. So this example is ergue, I believe. We can see the people in the foreground, and people are a good example of size, as we can kind of contextualize the size of a human being roughly within our mind. We all know roughly a human is so big. And as a result of that, when we kind of see the person that's kind of just underneath this big mech, one, our eyes are kind of drawn towards that mech because of the that red light that's going on there. Everything else is this nice kind of green, soft look to it, and then you've got this really sharp red light coming on here, and it really emphasizes the size of this mech because of the person standing on top of this platform in front of them. And again, another example of scale in this is size in this is the size of the hanger. You know, if you think that we know how big a person is, and now in relation to a person we know how big the mech is, and then we now know how big this hanger is in relation to everything. So I thought, yeah, brilliant example on this one. And then finally is space. And space can connect and separate objects, and space helps make your work easier to read and gives room on the canvas to kind of give you a bit of a break, making the subject of the piece to be more of the focus. This example, I'm not going to try and say his name, but this example is fantastic. The majority of 2/3 of the canvas is just space from what I can see. Kind of everything from these pillars just offset in the middle towards the right hand side is just space. And then it gets a lot busier as we get towards our focal point, which is kind of the Phantom Thieves. Most of the right hand side of the canvas is also darker to help emphasize this, just to keep your focus just being drawn to Ren, Arn, Ryuji and Morgana. And I really love that about this. You know, it's you don't have to understand the concepts of space to be able to kind of look at this, look straight where the artist wants you to look, and enjoy that piece as a result of that. I also think as a result, it's and perhaps this is just from playing the game and kind of understanding the beats of the characters, but it certainly makes the Phantom Thieves feel kind of like alone, if that makes sense. Like it's kind of them against everything else. But that could just be me reading into it because I understand the game, but not to say that wasn't part of the artist's intention with this. So next up, I did some daily figure drawings. I wasn't actually asked to do this, but I enjoy doing them, so I hope you enjoy watching them. So here we go. They don't seem to want to play properly, but that doesn't really matter. As you can see, I did some 30 seconds, some 1 minute, and then some 5 minutes, and then finished up with a 10-minute drawing. Really pleased with how these came out. For just a 30-minute study session, this really came out well. I really feel like from term one, this is the one thing that I've come out of that where I've gone, I feel really strong at this. And weirdly, as a result, feeling so strong in this makes me want to do it more. Yeah, so thoroughly enjoying it. Expect to see more. Let's hope I can keep growing. Next up is another watch a video. This video is Photoshop for Digital Production 2. And I really struggled watching this. I I struggle watching stuff that I feel like I know, as I tend to find it really hard to focus and pay attention. A lot of what we were talking about in this video was kind of around what your kind of general digital art tools are within Photoshop specifically. I don't know, I've been messing around with digital art programs since high school. I dare tell you how long ago that was. So yeah, I kind of felt like I know a lot of what was being spoken about and their uses, and I really had to kind of force myself to try and listen and try and find the things that I did not know, or more importantly, like a different way of understanding things or doing things. Because I don't want to just skip this and be like, I know everything, because I clearly don't. But yeah, I think if this was my first time learning about digital art tools and their functions, I probably would have had a lot easier time sitting and watching it. And I found that Marc really explains things really well and concisely. And I do think he explains things kind of like you're on a train route and you can kind of join the train at your ability level, if that makes sense. Like, he'll start right at the beginning of the train's route and you just have to figure out what stop you need to get on. Yeah, I don't know if that metaphor makes sense, but I really enjoy how he explains things, even if I do think I'm a know-it-all. So the next assignment, or the first assignment, is visual communication. So yeah, we were asked to observe everything and try and find the fundamentals in that we've learned about in the lecture, and try and find and offer feedback on others' works we see. And honestly, I'm not sure I'm up for giving feedback, as it kind of makes me feel uncomfortable right now. However, I thought I'd do a little study and talk about what I noticed while studying and what I liked about the piece, and kind of make baby steps into giving feedback. So again, it's another kind of persona related piece. The artist signature is on this, but I can't read it. But if you do know the artist, please do comment below so that I can correctly link to them as an artist. I think that's important. So yeah, if we talk about this, what do I notice about this piece? So the focal point is clearly Arn, sorry. And I think all of these kind of curved perspective lines originate at this kind of vanishing point with this kind of like white rectangle. Yeah, and I feel like the space of the whole left-hand side is just space. Like, there's very little detail. There's not much in the way of patterns and textures. And also I noticed that it's kind of really blue over on this side, kind of giving it this really cold feel. So that naturally, looking at this, my eyes are kind of brought over to that right-hand side where all the warmth is and stuff. And then I find these kind of curved lines coming from the vanishing point, which kind of bring you nicely to Anne. No matter which one of them you follow, you kind of end up being brought to Arn. And yeah, and the side that Arn is on is a lot more warm. There's a lot more warm colors, a lot more textures, a lot more patterns. You've got kind of size and scale, where we've got these small people in the background. Not small people, normal sized people far away. I'll learn the language, I'm sure. And yeah, it just really emphasizes kind of like the length of the platform. And I also found it kind of makes Arn feel like she's kind of distanced and kind of alone. And I kind of noticed as we kind of get to Arn, we're back to the blues again. If you notice, the side of this pillar next to Arn is a lot more blue than anything else on the platform, and Arn herself is kind of like blocked in with these kind of shadows, which then makes for a really striking silhouette against the kind of warmth of the rest of the platform. Yeah, I found this a really fun one to look at, to study, and to kind of get an understanding of. Yeah, I feel like there's a nice bit of storytelling there. I do. I'd love to understand it more, in all honesty. I'd love to understand it more and be able to create stuff like this myself. But yeah, let's hope that kind of looking at things like this will lead to that. But yeah, this was a fun study, and yeah, it was fun trying to focus on the fundaments and not just drawing. So next up is Photoshop assignments. And do you remember a minute ago when I was like, oh, I struggle to watch that video because I feel like I know everything? Well, I fucking hated this assignment. So first up was creating a title for a portfolio. And just for a second, just imagine being the guy who has spent 2 weeks making title cards for the new term of these videos, only to discover that one of the first week's assignment is to make a damn title. Don't I feel like an idiot? And then just to cap it all off, I forgot to make a time lapse for it as well. So, 10 points to King Idiot. Next up was creating little creatures for a 2D game. Which you might notice there's nothing else on the screen for. We're still looking at my portfolio thing. And I hated this. I really hated this. I couldn't find. Remember, I said I knew everything. I couldn't find Clip Studio Paint's equivalent of a lot of the things that Marc was talking about in Photoshop for creating like smart objects and stuff, and like layer fill type things specific to the object. And I don't know if it's that Clip Studio Paint hasn't got them, or I'm just too dumb to find them. But I ended up having to throw the towel in on this, and I decided to come back to it later, either with a copy of Photoshop, which I am far too poor to own, and to try and kind of make this work in Clip Studio Paint if I can. So moving on to the next one. The next assignment is a self-portrait assignment. So it says draw a self-portrait traditionally or digitally using good lighting and a mirror, not a photo. So yeah, a mirror. Who has a mirror? Well, I didn't. So yeah, I ended up having to kind of search my house looking to find a mirror, only to see one in my bathroom that I was kind of like, I could maybe remove this from my wall, which I did. And I come downstairs with this like 3 foot by 1 foot mirror, and then kind of sit at my desk with it balanced on my lap and holding it with one hand, drawing with the other hand. And then my next issue is how to see around the mirror to draw. Yeah, just the whole thing just got so bloody complicated. But yeah, I drew the majority of this with the mirror awkwardly sat on my lap, literally up until the point that my hand went to sleep and I had to kind of tap out. But fortunately, I got like the majority of that done before that, and then kind of just finished it off from my understandings of things. Yeah, this not the most interesting thing I've drawn this week, certainly. I'm really not a fan of self-portraits. I'm not really a fan of me. And yeah, that actually happens to be it for this week. But yeah, to answer a quick question from a friend who I shared this with, the one on the left is Plushy Matt, and the one on the right is Plushy Matt. Thanks. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me for term 2 even. I'm going to have to get used to that. Term 2, week 1. There's a link in the description for Marc Brunet's art school if you wish to join me on this art journey. And I've also put a link to every artist's work you see in this video in the description. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next week.